Last section.
My name is Holger Klemt. I'm CEO of IB Expert Company in Germany. If you want to write some questions to me and we find not the time to answer the questions here, simply send me an email. This whole presentation can be downloaded from ibexpert.com, firebird.pdf, and it will have much more pages than we typically should have for half an hour, so I will do a lot of pages much faster than I would do it in regular presentations. Let's talk about the Firebird server. What is the Firebird server? A Firebird server is a fully featured SQL database engine, powerful, lightweight, minimal configuration and administration needs. Easily scalable from single users, single database usage up to company-wide enterprise purposes. A single Firebird server can handle multiple independent databases, each with multiple client connections. So the best of all, it's true open source, completely free, also in commercial usage, so no limitations in distribution or anything else. Benefits of using Firebird. Why would you want to use Firebird? There are 5 key reasons. For example, functionality. It is really compact. It has not more than 3 megabytes of space, typically on a hard disk, which is required. There are some more libraries that you can use, but you must not use them. It is really easy to learn. It's free, and it has a large community. Even that the community is sometimes not in countries that you know. For example, it has a really large community in Brazil. I was on a Firebird conference in Brazil, in nearby Sao Paulo. We had more than 700 visitors there simply for Firebird. It is really famous in similar countries, for example, also in Russia. Okay, fast, reliable, it scales. What more could you wish for? A minimum install takes up to 3 megabytes of disk space. It can run as little as of 32 megabytes of memory. So almost any operating system that is currently available can run a Firebird server without a problem. This makes Firebird the smartest of full-featured database engines by far. Compared to express editions of the commercial things, we do not have to think about that. For example, if you bundle this application, the Firebird server, to your application, and you have to download also the SQL server as an express edition and perhaps the .NET framework, which will take much more download time for your application. Firebird is easy. It's easy to develop with, it's easy to deploy, it's easy to manage and administrate. There's no big need to learn a lot of SQL statements in a special way, because it uses a SQL standard as you know the SQL standard in almost all reliable databases. There are a lot of SQL statements which are completely exactly the same in platforms like MS SQL, like DB2, or also with Postgres or MySQL. They have a lot of similarities. There are sometimes some different things compared to, for example, Oracle, but this has mostly to do with Oracle. It is really easy to install. This is a short overview. A demo installation at a conference took 53 seconds from hitting the first enter button to start the installer up to opening the first database with a command line utility, and being able to process your first SQL statements on the database that was created by the statement. So I doubt that most of the other databases, especially the commercial databases, will install in 53 seconds. A lot of Linux distributions, for example Debian and Ubuntu and so on, has already integrated a package for Firebird 2.1, so you can simply use the package system and download the Firebird server, which will be installed automatically then. Firebird is free. You can download it at no cost and use it. You can redistribute it with your application without having to pay licenses fees or having open source your entire application. So there's no need in the GPL area. It has a Mozilla style license, so when you are using a fully commercial application, you can simply bundle it with Firebird and you do not have to take care about anything. You get the full source code, so you can change it if you should want to. So if you are interested in 2 million lines of C++ code developed within almost 25 years from now, well, it's not a ideal for doing it in 5 minutes to understand what happens inside, but you're welcome in the project to be part of the project. We need a lot of people there to extend the product. The community. Even that the community in Germany and in a lot of other countries are perhaps not as big as you expect them from other open source projects. There is a big community, but mostly the community comes from the Windows area, and especially there are a lot of people from Windows programming environments like Ball and Delphi, due to the fact that a lot of Delphi programmers in the past had already experience with the Ball and Interbase database, which is the ancestor of Firebird. And this results in a lot of Delphi Windows applications that running the Firebird server integrated. For example, if you are working at a website of the largest German supermarket discounter, Aldi, they have a photo software which you can download. And when you are downloading this photo software for develop your photos physically, you get a Firebird server installed automatically without knowing that. And there are a lot of other applications that are directly implement the Firebird server and install it for you without having the need to administer anything there. There are some countries where the Firebird community is much more active. A lot of Firebird developers are in Russia located. A lot of Firebird developers are located in South America. Brazil is one of the countries where a lot of people are working with Firebird. I would say, in my point of view, and from the talks of a lot of people in Brazil, Firebird is the most used database in Brazil. There are a lot of commercial software packages, and also from the government, a lot of packages are based on Firebird. It has commercial support from different companies. One of the companies is my company, for example, and but you only have to pay for commercial support if you really need to have it. Connectivity. A database is always useless when you cannot connect to it. Firebird connects with clients through all popular technologies quite well. And a few minutes ago, we talked about a lot of this technologies. SQL, the Firebird implements most of the core ANSI SQL 99 standard and several extensions from SQL 2000 standard already. For example, common table expressions are already implemented, recursive SQL queries are implemented, and they are already implemented since 2 or 3 years, depending on the feature that you want. So you have a lot of possibilities inside the SQL standard that is used already. On top of this, this has some unique features that are really unique compared to other databases. And sometimes if you are involved in the Firebird project and you need some solution for a separate task, and you have to change them to work with other databases, you will get sometimes a little bit disappointed that it's not available in other areas. But you will see, for example, some examples. Firebird implements type binary large objects, which is called a blob. The maximum size of a blob of a single record in a single column. You can define as many blob columns as you like in a single table. The maximum size is 128 gigabytes in a single column. So for typical applications, it should be enough. But there was also one guy saying that 640K was enough for all the time. I think his name was Mr. Gates. Directly support text blobs. That can be used with a character set, for example, with a Unicode character set, and directly supports this. It supports so-called blob filters. For example, if you have stored data, a simple example is you have stored data as JPEG files, but you need, for whatever reason, you need these files to be executed in an environment as a bitmap file, and you do not want to store a copy of it as a bitmap file. You can use a blob filter and convert it on the fly in a memo stream. It's really one of the features. Or an XML to RTF filter can be created using a blob filter. Internationalization, it has full UTF-8 support, fully internationalized, and due to the fact that a lot of countries are working with Firebird, we really often get informations about things that will not work in other countries. Our own product, ID Expert, for example, is translated into Japanese language, and when you change the language to Japanese language, you always have to remind that where you can switch it back to English or German language, otherwise you will not ever find the option somewhere in the menu. So it's sometimes really interesting in which countries the Firebird server is used. One of the features, fully supported transaction processing, which means ACID. So if you're doing any operation inside the database, it's always under transaction control. There's no way to avoid transaction control in Firebird. So it is not depending on anything like a storage engine or any other way. Everything that is working into a Firebird server, that is writing or reading in a Firebird server, works under transaction control. Due to some technical facts in the back engine, also a reading operation is working with transaction control. But I definitely have no time to explain it in this half hour. All the ANSI isolation levels except the dirty read are supported because dirty read is not a really ACID principle. And for example, the read committed and the repeatable read, or the serializable transaction state, is really easily implemented and can be used simply by changing the connection API to use this. There's nothing specifically done inside the database, for example. There's no need to put a snapshot somewhere on the data space or something like that. Embedded use. Firebird can be used as an embedded server. It has only a few megabytes, 1.5 megabytes, for example. It offers a services API and low maintenance, and it's ideal for including a database system in your applications. This can also be used, for example, to put your application together with the embedded server on a read-only volume, for example, on a DVD or something like this. One of the projects where Firebird is used is in Germany a medical list for all the informations about medical informations that you get installed a Firebird server and a database on a read-only disk, for example. One of the database servers that is able to process read-only databases is Firebird. Starting the server in the embedded environment simply is part of the same process that you have started. So you are in the embedded use part of the original process. Administration. The Firebird server has a services API. For example, you can directly create a backup and a restore on a remote server without accessing anything like a command line or terminal window or something like that. Firebird was designed to be self-managing and self-tuning. So the major reason behind that, if you have reached the 53 seconds to make your database work, after that time you are not forced to do anything on the database. You can do some operations for the administration task, but something like having a job as a Firebird database administrator would be a little bit strange because there's nothing to do. Other than a backup, does not need it to any DBA invention to keep running. A restore of the database is optional. The backup can be done as a hot backup always, so there's no need to avoid write processing while you're doing the backup. So it's fully, it has the fully potential for 24/7 operations, which can be used in separate applications. And this quality has been a major driver behind the success of Firebird in the past already. Constraints. Firebird has full support of constraints. Primary key, foreign key, check constraints, unique constraints, default, and not null. Check constraints can, for example, also be set on a record level. For example, this value must be larger than this value, or this value must be selected from any other combination of anything else. A check constraint can use full SQL statements, whatever you want to do inside your database. Referential integrity can be completely implemented, for example, cascading deletes, cascading updates, set null, set default, and so on. Everything is automatically can be defined on a declaration level, on the data definition level. Yes?
One question about the indexes or constraints. Do you support nullable unique constraints or indexes? So you have multiple nulls, but all the other values are unique?
We have nullable foreign keys, yes. So you can define a nullable foreign key, so there's no needed to have a value, but when you set a value, it must be from the foreign key relationship.
Okay, but I mean a normal constraint, so that you can have, say, 10 nulls, and then you have 100 different or unique values. Is that possible?
It is possible to be defined inside the foreign key based on the relation between the tables, but you can also replace it simply by creating triggers, and there you can have any rule set that you want to have inside your database.
Okay, thanks.
Firebird support triggers on tables and on views, and a trigger on a view is a really nice thing. Triggers can act on update, delete, and on insert, with full access to both old and new column values for all columns. And Firebird also support multiple triggers for each combination. For example, it can combine a before and an after update trigger, before after insert, and everything can be combined into one trigger. For example, it can be a universal trigger which reacts on every insert or update or delete statement. And you can serialize the triggers. You can give them a position up to 65,000, so they are serialized in the way process that you want to have them. So the amount of triggers that you can create are not limited. This is the multi-event, the so-called universal trigger, which is meant here. Stored procedures. It has an internal stored procedure language. It is really easy to understand. It has only a few extensions based on the SQL language, for example, for creating loops, for creating exceptions inside the database, for creating result data sets, and so on. And there are also debugging tools available, for example, in IDExpert that can be used for develop procedures a little bit more comfortable than compared to a simple text editor. It has support for user-defined external functions. These are functions that can be created in any language that, for example, is able to write a SO library or DLL in Windows, for example, Delphi, C++, or something like that. And it can be simply declared inside the database, and it uses this function from your library, whatever it does. This extends the SQL language internally. The Firebird distribution comes with 2 UDF libraries, and many more are available from third-party programmers. Views. Firebird support views, and what is not in all databases available, it supports updatable views also on joint tables. This is a really nice feature. For example, in a lot of environments we had the decision that the original database model was not a good idea to have a table with, for example, 300 columns or something like that, and we divided this original table into multiple tables. But we did not want to have every application to be rewritten. So we made a updatable, we created a view on the original, with the original table name, and the view was created with insert, update, and delete triggers, and the insert, update, and delete triggers divided all the operations to the individual tables. This runs really easy and is available in Firebird since, I think, 20 years already. And it's really a nice implementation if you're doing a kind of evolution in your database, not a revolution in your database. Redesigning your whole database model means always redesigning your whole application, and in most cases it is not so easy possible. Yes?
No, sorry, there's a wasp.
Yes.
But I do have a question actually.
Okay.
Do you have materialized views?
You can simulate materialized views with stored procedures, is no problem.
Well, sort of. Like, do they have their own indexes? Can you index a view? Because if you don't have a materialized view, it's hard to have like an index on it.
The materialized view, in my personal experience, the last time I had to do with a materialized view was the customer who created a materialized view in an Oracle server with the on-commit information. So with every of my commits, he recreated the view And it was really a bad idea because my application did perhaps 10,000 transactions each night for
So can I create a view that has a new index that's not on the underlying tables?
When we want to have a materialized view, we simply create an internal table and fill the table by triggers or by a store procedure. With a store procedure,
So
you would like.
You can't have a view with an index. You can. There's a workaround. But
There's a workaround, yes.
Okay,
but if you have a look at physical implementations, it is done in the same way. It is a physical implementation. There is a
oh,
physical
no, I know
table.
that. Like you have that with MySQL too. And if somebody said your answer to MySQL, they would say, "But that's not what I asked," and you know that's not the question. So I'm just seeing if it's different from what I know.
When you have a look at, for example, Oracle, it is simply created as a physical table below, and you just have a name for it, which is React as a view. But you can combine any information that is available. For example, you can also do a join on store procedures. It is also no problem in Firebird. Did I miss something? With check option and so on is also supported. For example, the procedural views. You have a keyword inside a procedure. When you have return parameters from a procedure and you are using for example, 3 return parameters, and you're using the keyword suspend, you simply shift all the informations that are currently in the return variables to a new record in the result set. So you can, for example, directly use the procedure as a table. You can do a simple select star from procedure, and it's really easy to do some really strange operations based on that. Subqueries. Firebird support fully subqueries and also the so-called derived tables. For example, you can replace any table name in any join operation with 2 brackets and replace it by any other valid SQL statement. And it can be nested with a maximum of up to 254 max subqueries per main query. But if anyone would any time send me a SQL statement with this limit reached, I would not even answer this email. Recursive queries are also supported, so you can directly have support in that case, for example, for tree structures and something like that. The common table expressions is also supported, which is one of the parts that is sometimes new in other database engines, but already since a few years available in Firebird. Database availability, it has an online reorganization. For example, it is when you're doing an update, it internally creates a new record version of your record with a transaction information, and after your transaction was committed, and no one can still see the old version of the record, the database itself does a reorganization. Can be compared when you come from the Postgres world with the vacuum keyword, but it is always done inside the engine without any possibility to avoid this. The Firebird server has a really powerful garbage collection thread internally, which does the work when he has time for that. Okay, Firebird was designed to be self-managing and self-tuning. Incremental reorganization. Reorganization not only in data parts but also in the indices. So also the indices are automatically reorganized. When the database server works on reorganization, you will not even see it internally, except then a little decreasement of performance. Firebird server does not support replication in the core engine. You can think of the shadowing system as a kind of a master-slave replication, but in that case you cannot work on the slave. So it's not a real way to have a read-only replication in the master-slave sense. But we offer some simple workshops to set up an online-offline replication, which can be used, for example, for laptop environments where people are offline for multiple times, or where, for example, servers are connected to each other. I mentioned the German press agency, which runs several replicated servers in several cities in Germany, and all of them are created, the replication are internally created by technologies that we have created for them. High availability, offers a range of high availability. It has an internal guardian process. For example, if anything happens, you have written, for example, a UDF that is not, it does not some nice memory management. It might make the process fail, and the guardian will restart the process in that moment, and it can be configured in different ways. For example, one process per client. So in that case, when your process has a problem inside the UDF, for whatever reasons you've written UDF that does not do a nice memory handling, only one process is killed in that case when you're using this UDF. This is a so-called classic server. If you have a hard disk hardware failure, for example, you can maintain it with a hot backup or a shadow on a second disk, which is a really easy way to have a copy of all the data in real time. The shadow is definitely in real time. It is synchronous writes on a second file, or more than one file. It can be used unlimited files. On Linux, it can be used also on a separate system. Online backups, you can do a backup of a database without shutting down, so no need to lock any of the tables. Everybody can still write on the database without any interruption. So backups are on the database level, so the typical way using the GBack tool does always a backup of the whole database, starting with Firebird 2. There is a new tool called nbackup, which does an incremental backup, which only backs up the changed parts of the database. Disaster recovery. Firebird has a careful write design, which always leaves the database in a consistent asset state. So, for example, if your database server simply reboots due to a hardware failure or whatever, the file written on the disk is still a valid database file. So it has no reason to reorganize something like a transaction log or something like that while you're opening the database. So it's really fast to access the database also after a failure. This is one of the reasons why the Firebird server is used, for example, in US military and field tanks, or in ships in Antarctic waters, for example, where you have sometimes a little bit more problems to drive to the next computer shop and buy a new hard disk or something like that. Firebird architecture does not require a write-ahead log or logging to recover from disaster. For example, if you compare it with something like Oracle, where a transaction log is processed while doing the restart, and you are working, for example, in the field tank where you shoot the next gun, the next thing out of the gun in front, it might be not a good idea to wait for the transaction log to see again what on your display stands where the next things come down where you should not stand at that moment. Security. It has full support for user authentication and authorization, so you can define, you can grant permissions on a table level, you can grant update rights also on a field level, you can use roles, and you can grant also functionality, for example, to objects. For example, when somebody want to work on a specific table, you can directly give him the rights only for a specific view, and the view gets itself the rights for the table. The user itself does not really get the rights for the table, which makes some more security possibilities. Encryption. Firebird itself does not encrypt the database or network communication itself. If it is required, we typically using a VPN environment or a product, for example, an open source product, which is called CBD, which is a secure IP tunnel, which can be used for this and also for compressing the data. Backups are not encrypted, so if one has access to the backup file, physical access to the backup file, he can use it for a restore. So if you do not like this, don't give him access to the backup file. There was one interesting project for a customer in Brazil. We were changing the binary format of a Firebird database file to change some internal values. So if somebody has stolen this database file from the Brazilian customer, he could not use a standard Firebird server for opening this file as a Firebird database, because it would not be recognized at that moment as a database file. It was really easy, and they had a special version of the Firebird server internally implemented that has the possibility to read this kind of database. It was a simple way to do that, but really successful for that. Firebird has no internal auditing functionality, as it has a lot of functionality, for example, so-called monitor tables, where you can use all, where you can see all current SQL statements that are currently running with all information, performance, reads, writes, indexed operations, non-indexed operations, and so on. But when somebody has committing his transaction and closing his connection, everything from the monitor tables is lost. So there are some third-party tools which can be used, for example, for having something like auditing, who has changed the price to what. Administration, installation is really easy, and the installation time typically for a Firebird server, less than 5 minutes. Disk space, full installation with everything that comes is about 25 megabytes. Required is only about 3 megabytes. So I would say that this is the smallest full functional SQL database engine when you are working with transactions and so on. Memory minimal configuration can be used from 16 to 32 megabytes, depending on the operating system. Typically, a rule could be at least 10 megabytes per concurrent user connection should be installed to have a comfortable work with the Firebird server. So, for example, you can work with 100 users on 1 gigabyte of RAM without a problem. Ongoing administration, I will do it fast and fast and fast. Native administration tools, there are some administration tools already inside the package. For example, something like an ISQL, which is not very comfortable, but can be used for your daily work. But there are a lot of GUI tools available on the third-party vendors. For example, one of the tools is the IB Expert tool that is available in our company. There's also, IB Expert is also a free functional limited version, but a full supported version. And there's also a multi-platform version that is called Flame Robin, based on Java. Server platforms, Windows, Linux, Solaris, FreeBSD, Mac OS X, APX. Every client can also be on that environment. 64-bit support currently available for Windows and Linux. And Firebird 3, commercial, blah, 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 blah. Control is held by the Firebird project, which is a combination of separate contributors of code, and they are deciding what happens in the project next. So, as you can see, sometimes a new release takes a little bit longer than in commercial projects, because they still wait for having a stable version of the project. Firebird itself running since 9 years and not slowed down. Last year or last month they won the SourceForge Net Award for Best Project for the Enterprise. It is hosted on SourceForge, so anyone who wants to have a look at the source code, simply download it from SourceForge. Was created based on the interface version released by the company Borland. And Borland interface has some roots in 1984, where Jim Starkey, who later on joined MySQL team, created a database which was first called, I think Groton Database was a name. But every time on the telephone they said Groton Database, anyone understand Rotten Database, which is not a good marketing idea for a database name. So they decided to rename the product to Interface. It's included in a lot of applications. For all versions we estimate about 5 million copies running around somewhere on the world installed. So you will definitely find somewhere a Firebird server, even if you do not even think about that. The precise number not available, a lot of environments, a lot of customer base, Russia and so on, and questions, no time for questions. So simply ask me the questions to this address, hklemt@ibexpert.com. Or if you have some more time left, just ask it and we will shut down the room, and I think we have to shut down the room really early to make some people here from the university a little bit more happy to get earlier into their weekend. Okay, any questions?
Questions, yes.
No, okay. Think about the questions and put them by email, and thank you for being here. Thank you for being on the conference, and we might see somewhere else again.
Thank you very much.